If in 2017, Cody would have pitched me his idea, honestly, I would have laughed in his face and I would have been dead wrong because he is killing it. The thing is, he decided to effectively take on Uber in 2017 when Uber was already a multi-billion-dollar company. Dara, the new CEO, was already there. They clearly had won all major markets, and Cody decides with $3,000 to start a company to do rideshare in very small cities across Canada. The funny thing is today he's only raised $1 million. He's had to make it through COVID. There was a point where he was like literally 3 weeks away from going bankrupt. And now he's in dozens of cities, has tens of millions of dollars in revenue. He just launched Mexico and he owns the vast majority of his company. So who's laughing now? Typically on the show, we go after very late stage startups who are clearly already hyper successful, who've raised a lot of money, who've exited for hundreds of millions of dollars. But I know a lot of founders still want to hear from people in the trenches. So I'm sure you haven't heard of Unride, you haven't heard of Cody, but I'm also sure you're going to love the story. Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Cody, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, man.
So, dude, I mean, I'm really excited to talk to you because, so the way I think about it is it's 2017, right? That's when you start Unride. And at this point, Uber's like 8-9 years old. They've raised like over $1 billion. They're on their second act. Like at this point, like Dara's hired, like the original founder's out. That's how long they've been in market. And you decide to launch effectively something that's competitive and you win at doing it. And you did it with like $3,000. So anyways, like, take me back to that time, man. Like, how does that happen?
I guess like one thing I should say is like, I didn't know what a venture capitalist was when we started. I didn't know what a startup was when we started. I knew nothing. So you're talking to a guy, like I grew up in a small town, Thunder Bay. It's a small town in Canada, about 100,000 people. And I just wanted to be a professional soccer player. And so I worked my butt off, my whole life growing up. I moved to Europe when I was young. I was playing soccer overseas for a long time. In 2017, I got injured and I had to get a couple of hip surgeries in the US. And I basically went back home to do my rehab and I was going to be out of soccer for 1 year. And then when I was back home, like every time I'd go out in Thunder Bay, at the end of the night, I'd see crowds of people stranded with no ride home. And it was just insane. It'd be like minus 30 outside. Yeah, people would be waiting an hour for taxis. If it was a holiday, you could wait 3 to 4 hours. People would walk home in these temperatures or just drink and drive. And like when I was growing up, I had tons of friends have issues with, impaired driving and stuff. Actually, one of my best friends, his brother was driving drunk and killed someone. And then the person he ended up killing was like, man, it was another friend of mine. It was her brother and like someone I grew up with. Our families were close. It's just like, this is I thought this is a problem that shouldn't exist. Started diving into the numbers, like the rates of deaths caused by impaired driving in these smaller towns is 7 times higher than places like Toronto and bigger cities. And it's just a stat that shouldn't exist. So I'd go out with friends and after the bar, I would just like, obviously I wouldn't drink. So I'd just give free rides. And I'd go back and forth from the bar, just picking people up, giving free rides. And I couldn't put a dent into these crowds of people. At a certain point, I just thought like, you know what? Screw it. We're going to start a rideshare company in Thunder Bay. There's no Uber, no Lyft, hour wait times for taxis. This is a problem that shouldn't exist. We're going to go for it and try to fix this problem here. And when we first started,
you weren't in the startup game and these sort of things that I get, but obviously you knew Uber and Lyft or like you'd used some of these apps before. Did you think through, well, I'm sure they'll come here, or did you just kind of dive right in? You just honestly didn't really care about like competitive boats or competitive matrices or any of this kind of like fancy random venture stuff?
I didn't care. I just like when we started, this was all about just getting people home safe. There wasn't ride sharing in my city, so people needed rides. I couldn't do it just giving rides on my own. So literally, it was a problem that we just thought shouldn't exist. And like one thing we don't normally talk about is like you couldn't do ride sharing when we first started. I approached a credible organization called Operation Red Nose. And I'm like, hey, if we can figure out how to get you an app and get you running all year round, they basically give free rides every December to like prevent impaired driving. So we approached them and we went to their went up to head office and we got shut down. But if that would have went through, we probably would have been a not-for-profit, just giving free rides all year round just by donation. So they shut us down. And then from there, it was like, this is a problem we still need to figure out how to fix. So I started reading through the bylaw in my city. And I saw this one line that like limousines could set their own rates. I'm like, okay, we could work with that. So like I called up a local limousine company. You guys have your cars parked, I got this idea. We can like work together to prevent impaired driving. Whenever your cars aren't used, put them on the road.
Dude, you are like, it's like, this is the Uber playbook, just like 9 years later. Like, it's crazy.
Seriously. And they thought we were nuts. So they shut us, they're like, they hung up on us and kind of left it there. And then I went to another limousine company. There's only 2 in Thunder Bay. I went in there and I'm like, listen, impaired driving is a massive problem. You won't have to do anything. Anytime your cars are parked, I'll get them on the road. We'll fill them with drivers. We'll get, we'll be able to like get way more people home in our city, and you can make money doing, very little or doing nothing. And if it doesn't work, you're in the same position you're in now. And if it works, it will help the community and you'll make a couple bucks from it. And so they still thought we were nuts, but they gave us a shot, and we partnered with them. And so the early days.
And you needed the limos because you couldn't like legally do it with kind of a distributed marketplace model?
They had a bylaw that didn't allow us to like get people in their own cars driving.
I see. Okay.
So that was like a huge. It got us off the ground and got up and running. We knew nothing. Like again, literally, you're talking to someone that like knows nothing about business, nothing about the startup world.
Did you know how to code, or like how did you build? Like, was it an app at the beginning, or was it more of like a service?
It was an app, but even that, like, I didn't know how to code, didn't know how to do anything. I basically started looking at hiring developers to build an app and hiring companies to build an app, and they're like, it's $300,000 to get something built. I'm like, I don't have $300,000. I just paid for a couple hip surgeries. Like we got like $3,000 to probably put into this. And then, so we ended up like calling a bunch of different companies that failed and looking at like their code and their software. And then there was like a bunch of different white labels out there that we could use to get off the ground. And we ended up making a deal for, I think it was like $1,500 to get off the ground. And we just partnered with someone, got a platform, makeshift platform that we used to launch.
So like somebody else's white label platform for $1,500. That was like the original app. Crazy.
Yeah. And then from there, we basically the night before we launched, like I didn't tell anyone about what we were doing, which is probably the worst kind of way to go about it. But like the night before we launched, I put a post on my personal Facebook just talking about this problem and how this is a problem that shouldn't exist. People need access to reliable transportation, and we're starting Unride to solve this problem originally in Thunder Bay. That post went viral in our city. So like small town, it got like, 600 shares. People started downloading the app.
Wow.
And then like the first order came through. And I remember going to pick this person up, got them in the car, was so excited. And then I forgot to click drop off on the ride. So I actually screwed up the first ever ride.
So you were doing them yourself. Like you were the driver in the limo. You would pick them up in limos?
In black SUVs. Yeah.
Black SUVs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So started off with I was just driving and we had no money for employees. So we literally had to do everything, learn how to run a business. Orders started coming through, downloads started coming through. Then CBC saw my Facebook post and then they picked it up and did a story. And then after that story came up, it was weird. They wrote a story like professional soccer player starting Uber-like service in Thunder Bay. And it was just, after that came out, we started getting thousands of downloads coming in, and then demand started exploding. And then we had to start filling up.
All within Thunder Bay, or did you start getting downloads like in other? Okay. So you're taking over that city. I mean, it's not, how many people in Thunder Bay to begin with?
110,000.
Okay. So you're quickly getting like meaningful market share.
Yeah. And then the limousine company I think they had like four SUVs at the time. So those got filled. We filled them with drivers. And then we had to learn how to I knew nothing about payroll, nothing about all these different things, and we had no employees. So we had to figure out all that stuff. And then from there, demand just started outgrowing supply. We was just growing way faster than the amount of cars that we had. So the limousine company started buying more cars. In between that period too, I had to go get like 2 major hip operations in the US. So I remember like waking up from surgery, grabbing my laptop and working dispatch and calling some of these drivers. And the 6 months after that, honestly, it was just like a blur. Sleeping at 30-minute intervals, no money to hire any employees, and we're a 24-hour business. So
and how? By the way, what's just to give me a sense of timeline? When in 2017 do you put that post out, and then when are we now?
March 27th was when we did the post the night before, and it just kind of blew up, and downloads started coming in, and then from there it was just chaos for the next 6 months. Yeah, sleeping.
And was it just focused because you started with this idea of impaired driving at night? Was that the main use case, or were people already using it just like Uber for everything, across the day?
We started off really focused on that, just preventing impaired driving. And we were always focused on making sure people had a ride at night, but we operated 24/7. People started using us to go to and from work, to and from school, and just weekdays started getting a lot busier, started hiring more drivers. Limousine companies started buying more cars. Then from there, we had to find other partners because there was just no, we just couldn't keep up. And so we ended up partnering with this busing company. That was kind of crazy, story for another day, but this person owned an airline too. And then tried to buy the company. We didn't want them to buy it. So they ended up like, maybe not good for a story for another day, but they ended up like blackmailing us and trying to put us out of business and started a competitor.
Oh, wow.
All these crazy things. After a couple of months, we started working on just like getting the bylaws changed and getting a rideshare service, people in their own cars. We found a couple loopholes to work with where we could get up to like, 25, 30 cars in our city through limousine company, this busing company. And then we found something where people could lease their cars to one of these companies, fall under their insurance and their licensing and still be classified correctly under the bylaw. So that helped us scale up.
And you're finding like, this is the other thing, like you're not really funded. Like Uber did all this stuff, but they had like people, dedicated to doing this stuff. This is like you, like, I guess at night figuring out regulations and then like trying to find loopholes and stuff.
Yeah. No money, no employees, and no idea what we were doing. Like, yeah, it was chaos. So like the bylaw, I read through the bylaw 3 times. And then on the 3rd time is where I saw that like line. I'm like, maybe I think this will work. And then we just went with it and it did.
Yeah, you just go with it. Cause that's the other thing. You're not going to pay a lawyer to like double check it for you or at that stage, right? You're just going to say like,
no money.
Exactly. So you're like, I think I get it. I think it's a loophole. I don't know.
Yeah. So that worked. Then we got the bylaw changed. And then like we got pretty good at just like finding ways. I think I told you from that first article that came out, we got a bunch of downloads. We basically found ways to get press. Like every month I basically became friends with like all the journalists in Thunder Bay. I would pitch stories to them all the time. They would pick them up and we just started getting a lot of that stuff. Like Facebook. So in Thunder Bay, like a lot of people loved Facebook. So I used to record these videos all the time as we were building the business, just like what we were up to, what was happening and how things were going. And like those started getting like 20, 30,000 views in a town of 100,000 people. Right. So that started taking off. And then we were just like completely obsessed with our customers. So it didn't matter. Again, no employees, we're exhausted all the time, but it didn't matter if it was 4 a.m. and tired and I don't want to get out of bed. If my phone rings, I'm hopping in the car and going in to pick people up. Like the early experience with Unride, when you booked a ride, I would like crutch. If it came in at like 4 a.m, I would crutch out of my uncle's basement, wake everybody in the house up because I was recovering from these operations, throw the crutches in the passenger seat, go pick people up. And they would like hop in the car and they'd see this person like in a massive hip brace. They'd have to like move the crutches over. They'd be like, "Are you okay to drive?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. Hop in." And then they would hop in. And then my phone would just ring nonstop with customers in the car because we had no employees. So it'd be other drivers that would need help. So I'd have to like take calls with customers in the car and be like, "Is it okay if I take this? I'm so sorry." And then I'd have to basically pull over, take these calls, help other drivers working dispatch, continue the ride, stop the ride early so that these customers in my car weren't overcharged. And it was just like, when I say it was chaos, the first 6 months were, it was sleeping in 30-minute intervals and just doing whatever it took to try to get people picked up and try to get them home safe. Yeah. And then eventually convinced my co-founder.
And what was like, you know what, my question is like, what was your aspiration or goal at the time? Like, were you, because you weren't from this venture world, I'm going to do this and then I'll raise a bunch of money and whatever. And so were you thinking, I'm going to create this great service in Thunder Bay and like whatever? Were you just day by day, or did you already have an ambition of like, oh, this could become like a really big company, we could spread to 10, 20, 50, 100 cities? Yeah.
So when we started, I just wanted to fix this problem in Thunder Bay. Like this is a problem that shouldn't exist. It was in my city. Wanted to fix this problem and then go back to soccer and kind of do my thing. What happened after, we started getting people from across the country that were either studying in Thunder Bay or traveling through Thunder Bay that would say, "Hey, I'm from Sudbury. We got the same problem you have. Please come to our city. I'm from Kamloops in British Columbia. You need to come to our city." And so we basically started to realize this was a problem, not just in Thunder Bay, but in smaller communities across Canada. And then it turns out like there's over 1 billion people in these smaller communities around the world that don't have access to reliable transportation. And it's a problem that shouldn't exist. So really quickly after we launched, we realized it's not good enough for us to just fix this problem in Thunder Bay. It's a problem that exists everywhere. And so we're going to figure out how to make it work here, how to fix this problem in this one city. And then we're going to start hitting the gas and expanding to different markets and just fixing this problem around the world.
When did you start shifting like within Thunder Bay to this complete chaos? You're the one doing, like driving people around to something a little bit more organized or at least like tech enabled where you're at least not the person behind the wheel. Let's say that.
Yeah. Honestly, I kept driving for a really long time. I still drive now. Couple months in, I basically got my cousin to quit his job. He was working downtown Toronto doing like marketing and ops for a med tech company. I got him to quit his job and move to Thunder Bay and work on this with me. So then there was at least 2 of us that were on call 24/7. So it was like a little bit better. And then a couple months after that, we saved up enough where we could hire a dispatcher for 8 hours a night that would take calls before us. So that was incredible. And then from there,
because this was sorry, and just to make sure, like this was a call, like this was like a taxi almost, like you called it. It's on an app, or how did you call it?
People would book through our app. So remember, we started with like a white label service, so people would book through our app. There's so many things happening behind the scenes with like customers who don't get picked up, or refunds that are needed to get, or drivers calling you. We had like 24/7 call line. Any driver who needed help, call us. And then we also had our app turned on as drivers. We'd be getting drivers reaching out. We'd be getting calls to go pick customers up anytime that we were backed up. And then all the customer support tickets.
And what about, by the way, like, so Uber wasn't there, Lyft wasn't there. What about like taxis? Like, was that just, there weren't a lot, or there weren't a lot at night? How did that work a little bit?
I don't want to bash taxis, but it was horrible. It was just horrible. So like taxis, the problem with the taxi model is it's fixed supply, but demand is obviously elastic. So someone has 20 cars on the road and they put 20 cars on the road throughout, 24/7. Like they can't meet the peaks in demand before work, after work, Friday, Saturday night, where these spikes are. And then the other thing that would happen in my city, it's just like the customer service was a lot of times, like if you called for a taxi, wouldn't answer the phone, or there was one person working there that is like famous in our city who would just like treat every customer, like she'd hang up on you, she'd do all these things. So just like, yeah, it was people with the passion at that time in Thunder Bay hated the taxi service. It had a monopoly for like 20, 30 years. And we needed ride sharing. You have flexible supply. You can meet the peaks in demand. And it's just, I think, a better model that, And then the biggest difference too is like we were obsessed with our customers. So anytime something went wrong, customers were always first and did everything we could to just keep taking care of people.
And so you get this dispatch person, at least like they're handling like the night shift. What about like the car side? Are you still mainly working with these partners, these like black cars, limos, or how late into the game do you shift to just the kind of Uber model, like bring your own car and then you can sign up as a driver?
Sort of happened in 3 phases with like just limousines and black cars. Then we partnered with that busing company and we started getting people to lease their cars to the busing company, falling under the insurance and licensing. So we were able to get people in their own cars that way and really scale up. And then from there, there was, I think what I told you before, someone, the person tried to acquire us when we didn't want to get acquired, tried to blackmail us into like changing the bylaw and all these crazy things, and tried to shut us down. And so we shifted everything at that point to the model that we have today, where people are in their own cars, similar to what you would experience with Uber, Lyft, and some of the other rideshare companies. Hopefully friendlier drivers and a better service.
And walk me through like I don't know if you remember the numbers in Thunder Bay, both just in terms of like volume and also in terms of like, because you hadn't raised, I guess you were at least somewhat profitable from the beginning.
Yeah. We kept our expenses. Like we had no employees, no salaries for anyone. Drivers were making commissions. So that split happened there. And then the numbers, basically the first couple of months, 2017 was when we launched. So the first 7-8 months, we did about $500K in gross bookings. Our first year, it took us about 12 months to get over $100K a month. 2017, $500K. 2018, $1.5 million. And then 2019, we did about 2.7. Then from there, 2020, we were on like a great trajectory. And then COVID obviously came in and just crushed us, where we lost like 85% of our revenue overnight, and we're 3 weeks away from going bankrupt. So that was a crazy scenario. I got a bunch of stories from there. We should have died like numerous times.
Well, let's go. We're there already. Let's go there.
Okay, cool. So like at this point, company's becoming bigger. We're operating in multiple cities. We're growing at a decent pace. We know what we're doing. We're investing. We're hiring people, all these different things. And I'm actually back in Europe playing soccer. So I was off for 1 year, got healthy, and then went back to Europe. And then running this thing, we're growing this thing kind of on the side of soccer.
So you're running it remotely while you're full-time like pro soccer player?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that was intense. Like I don't recommend that for anyone.
No.
But it was basically like soccer and you ride and very little sleep. And like personal life was zero. Family and friends, like obviously, like every other area of my life suffered a ton.
Well, because soccer, like being pro sports and like that's not like a 9 to 5. That's like a all in type of thing. So you're already pretty consumed by one thing now too.
Yeah. That was nuts. So it's possible for people to do it, but it'll definitely like your personal relationships, probably all these different things will suffer. So you got to be kind of good with that for a while. Yeah. If there's anyone actually thinking of doing that, feel free to reach out. I got some stories on how sort of managed both. And I probably did a terrible job, but we survived and made them both work. yeah, from there, so I was in the UK. And then what happened when COVID was happening? I remember we got a call, like we knew that it was spreading throughout Europe. And then I got a call one night and it was like, yeah, the league's going to be paused for 2 weeks. So we're in the middle of the season. I'm like, okay, the league's going to be paused for 2 weeks. So I just like called my coach. I'm like, if we're all like, we're forced to stay at home, we're going into lockout or whatever, can I just like hop on a flight, go back to Canada, and like when this thing settles down in 2 weeks, like I'll come back and finish the season. So coach gave me permission. So I left back to Canada. And then when you came back to Canada, I think at that time you had to isolate when you came in. So first I isolated in Toronto, the hotel there, then went to Thunder Bay. And I remember going into this Airbnb with my co-founder, and our revenue just in the span of a week fell off a cliff. So we went from being growing business, things were good, to being 3 weeks, like we were losing $80,000 a week and we were 3 weeks away from going bankrupt.
And you were at what? Like just like you were doing, was it 3 million gross bookings at the time ish? Like rough numbers?
Yeah, around 3 million probably.
To like a couple $100K, like something like that.
We were down to like, it was bad. I think at that period, I think our monthly gross bookings dropped to like 80K.
Wow.
I'm messing up the numbers here, but 85% drop in revenue in the span of a week, and being 3 weeks away from going bankrupt. And so we just had to, and then we were also in isolation at that time, right? Locked into this house, couldn't leave. I just got back from Europe, obviously. So 2 weeks not being able to leave.
And the 3 weeks from going bankrupt, like at this time, how many cities are you in roughly?
We're probably in like 6-7 cities at that time.
6-7 cities. And you actually have now like employees and actual ongoing expenses.
And we were ramping up because we were like growing, things were good. So we were reinvesting back into growth right before this. And so from there, it was like, okay, we got to make like a lot of changes really quick. So one thing, we reached out to BDC and like, I basically signed a personal loan to give us a couple extra weeks. So we did that. And then from there, we looked at the existing team. We had to change like a lot of our org structure. So we had city managers at that time. We had to like really cut it down, which was, obviously horrible for everyone who was affected by it. And then for us, just like having to let people go was insane. Like we'd never experienced anything like that.
For sure. How many people do you remember roughly? Like you were 20 down to 7, or like what was kind of how big of a thing was it?
Yeah, we probably went from like 16, 17 people to like 10. We let go of a decent, like a pretty big portion of the company. And then from there, everyone who stayed, we still didn't have enough money to like pay everybody. So everyone who stayed, obviously like me and my co-founder, our salaries are at zero, but everyone else who stayed ended up, like we said, if everyone takes a 30% pay cut, then we could just like hold the fort and like not let go of as many people. Like we can't hold the fort. We have to shift to figure out how we're going to survive, but it at least gives us a little bit more time. And so we talked to all our employees about that, and everyone was incredible. There were some people on the team who said like, hey, I have savings. Like if there's someone else who needs the 30% and needs it for their rent, whatever, they can take the 30% from me. It was like, I actually have goosebumps. Just the people that stepped up during that period to keep our company alive.
That's epic.
Yeah. And then from there, it was like, what are we going to do? We got to survive, and we won't last. Like we'll die even with all these changes in a really short period. So at the time, like I said, I was in lockdown, and I was trying to order through Instacart, trying to order food through Walmart, and like I couldn't get access to groceries. So I ended up like at family and friends that in my city that could at least bring me some food. But I'm like, this is a huge problem.
Was Instacart, so like Instacart was live, for example, in Thunder Bay?
Instacart was live, but they had a 3-week wait to get groceries. And like, you're in lockdown, so you couldn't
get now
delivered. Yeah. And then we're like, okay. And then our customers started reaching out, asking us, hey, can you deliver stuff for us? We're kind of in the same boat that, myself and my co-founder were in. So we're like, what, screw it. We're going to shift the whole company towards grocery deliveries. And so in the span of 2 weeks, we ended up launching a new platform with grocery delivery, alcohol delivery, and a digital corner store that we ran out of our Airbnb. And so we like scraped all of, we scraped all of Walmart's website, scraped all of the Superstore. We had these stores on the app that people could go on, order. We shifted all our drivers because there was no rides coming through for ride sharing. We shifted them to doing just like shopping for groceries and delivering them. And then from there, we started sending messages out to all our customers. People started ordering groceries through us. We started calling, like the margins were pretty slim on it. So then we called, what's the company? There's companies that supply grocery stores. So we started calling some of them, and then
like Cisco, these sort of things.
Cisco, exactly. Cisco was who we work with, and then we just made made orders from Cisco to start our own. It was called Umart, so like a digital corner store, and we literally ran it out of our Airbnb. So like a Cisco truck pulled up with just boxes of different groceries and things people could order. Our whole Airbnb was covered to the ceiling in different things that people could order through our app, and our margins were better on that.
And did you limit the selection then to like actually have? Yeah. Okay. You just limited the SKUs. You got the essentials, and then you just used your Airbnb as like a warehouse.
Yeah. So to whatever we could fit in the Airbnb, and we like picked. I think it was like 100 items, and we launched Umart, so that was up and running. And then LCBO, so we like ended up scraping the LCBO's website, put it all on our app. People could go order alcohol through us, and that blew up as well. And then, we started getting orders through every single person in the company. Everyone's roles changed. So everyone shifted towards grocery delivery, alcohol delivery. And
did you start scaling this after outside to your other cities?
We started looking at doing it in other cities. We had a ton of technical problems. So like we launched a separate app in 2 weeks. And it was like putting 20,000 items from Walmart on there. It was like, there was tons of things we were working out. So I wanted to kind of scale, launch a bunch of cities. We ended up, I think we launched in Chatham, Kent, and Sudbury as well for a short period. But then we stuck to Thunder Bay, and we're like, hey, let's build this up in Thunder Bay, work out the kinks, make enough money to keep the company alive, and then we can scale it from there. And we did. We survived. We made like, what did we do in gross bookings? I think the first year we did like maybe $700K in orders through this separate thing. And we were just survived throughout all this. And then there were a bunch of other problems we ran into. So just like always new things. I don't know if you remember at that time, grocery stores would have lineups of 45 minutes, sometimes an hour to get in. So like you couldn't have someone now go to a grocery store as a driver, wait in line for an hour, go in and shop, and then go deliver and still make money on it. So we ended up hiring people that literally all day sat inside Walmart and the Superstore shopping full time. And then they would shop, go to the door, hand off groceries to delivery drivers and go back in, and they wouldn't have to constantly wait in the line. It was nuts. It was chaos, but we did what we had to do to survive. And our whole team just like pivoted it on an instant. And it was a ton of work by a lot of people, and they kept the company alive. And I remember at the start of this, when we were making all these, like right at the start, when everyone had to take a pay cut of 30% and we're really close to going bankrupt. I remember telling people like, I'm like, we're going to come out the other side of this and we're going to be 10 times bigger. We're going to be way stronger because I like, honestly, didn't have an idea how we would do it. I was like, but yeah, from that point, what are the numbers? I think we're like, well, those significantly bigger. We're probably 50 times the size we were from that low point in COVID. Sure. When all our revenue dropped. Yeah, it was huge effort by the whole team.
And are you now like a mix of those two things, or are you mainly back to rides and this is like a little icing on the cake sort of thing?
Back to rides. So another really like controversial thing in the company is we did a ton of work launching these other services, but then when ride sharing started coming back, and we were like sort of getting out of COVID, we were spending 90% of our time on grocery deliveries, alcohol deliveries, and something that wasn't our core business. And then ride sharing, we noticed, started going up. And like during that time, I ended up making a call to shut down all of that, like shut down the app, shut down that business, and get hyper focused on ride sharing. And this is something that a lot of people in the company, half the company was like pissed and thought it was like a terrible mistake. And it actually could have been. We did it anyways. We got hyper focused on our core business. And from that point, there was a couple changes we made, but we grew from like, first we got back to where we were with the 3 million or so that we were at before COVID. Then from there, went to like 6 million and then to 15 million. And then our growth chart just started like exploding after that. So
what were some of the changes?
One of the biggest ones was just like, one of the differences between us and let's say Uber and Lyft. Uber and Lyft, customer experience, you just book a ride when you need it. Someone comes picks you up. It's similar with Unride, but on the driver side, when you go into a small town, you have if drivers drive anytime that they want, like with Uber and some of these other platforms. If it's a Monday afternoon and you have 100 cars on the road, like drivers get frustrated and they churn from the platform, and you don't have an unlimited number of supply of drivers in these cities. You could just kind of keep pumping. We really try to make it a great job for drivers. And so our drivers schedule themselves according to the demand that we're predicting so that they get consistent, reliable flow of rides, even in these low density areas. And it's something that's working. And we were doing that before COVID as well. But then, like I was watching this YouTube video about like how cities were powered. And if you look at like the demand curve of power in a city, like before work, throughout the day, after work, when people are watching TV, doing laundry, it's like another demand spike up. It looks like a really similar to the demand curve of ride sharing. And then from there, it showed like how you actually power a city. So I don't know much about this stuff, but it showed nuclear energy that's like always running, always stable, and can provide like a base power supply to power a market. Then you have these like peaks in demand before work and after work. And that's like, you know, you could use a lot of renewable energies for that. And then on these random things where the Super Bowl's on and you need like a quick spike of energy, you could use gas, which you don't really want to use, but you can. And we basically just like took that and applied it to ride sharing, where it's like, okay, these full-time drivers, people that are doing a lot of hours, that's like your nuclear energy kind of power supply. These peaks in demand before and after work, that's where a lot of like the part-time drivers, people that are working full-time somewhere else that want to come, make a couple extra bucks. We can use that for those peaks of demand. And then Friday, Saturday nights, where these massive peaks, or if it's a holiday or a snowstorm, we could use surge pricing if we need to. So similar to gas. So
and before this framework, you didn't have that, or like what? Like, 'cause this is a framework, but what does that really mean in terms of like? Did you go out to some people and say, "Hey, do you want to be a full-time driver? Here's like more of a salary type comp," or how did that really materialize?
We started offering minimum guarantees to people who wanted to be on for X amount of period, so they could still have flexibility, pick the shifts that they want to work or whatever. But yeah, we went in really focused. We noticed that in some of our markets that were all just part-time drivers really, really struggled. And then the markets that just had people that were doing a lot of hours, those kind of struggled too to meet these peaks in demand. So in the different markets, we targeted different drivers to get like, okay, people that are doing, taxi type work with people that are doing part-time before work, after work, and then adding in surge pricing when we need it. And it just started working, man. Like if you look at the curve, so from there, we just started growing. I think that was when we went from like 3 to 6 to 15. And then like, it's just like.
And you're still kind of doubling now, well beyond that. And so how many cities are you in now? How many drivers do you have on the platform?
Yeah, we're in 24 cities right now. 23 of them are in Canada, and we just launched our first international market. We got a couple thousand drivers. And so drivers are growing. We got like another thing about our drivers, just like we have some of the friendliest, kindest people on our platform. I don't know how this happens and how we get so lucky, but seriously, I hear it again and again from customers. Like people, what do you expect? Like, what do you like about Ride? I always expect them to say like the price or the pickup times. That people really care about that stuff. But more often than not, they say the drivers are people that we could have a whole other podcast just sharing stories about our drivers. Our drivers, like there's been stories where drivers have saved passengers' lives. There's been all these crazy things that have happened. So I'm super, super grateful. And I have no idea how we got this lucky.
And you've done all this with like, how much have you actually raised?
Yeah. So over the years, we raised 2.1 million from angels, Canadian. And we got to a couple million a year with like $3,000,
which is crazy. Oh, so now you're doing 20-something cities in Canada. I know you opened up Mexico as well, thousands of drivers. You take 40%. So you got even, millions of dollars in revenue, and only $2 million raise. So you're in a great position. The big question I have to ask, is what's going on with Uber and Lyft, man? Like, what are they doing? And how do you think about that? Because is there a point at which this gets interesting to them and they come in? Do you care? Do you worry? It's the classic, like, why wouldn't Google do it? Except in this case, it's like so easy for them theoretically to do it, at least you would think. So for an outsider, you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to a lot of first of all, for us, we're focused on being the best in the world at serving these smaller communities. So we want to have higher utilization rates and higher success rates than anyone in these smaller communities. And there's a bunch of things that we're doing to be the best operators in the world, provide the best service to our customers in the world in these areas. So that's like what we're doing internally. As far as like the other companies, I can't speak for them, but if you talk to like any Uber GM running country, a lot of their focus is on, if it's Canada, their focus is on the GTA and Vancouver and Montreal, right? Majority of the revenue comes from those three markets. So all these other places in Canada are nice to have, nice to be in. But yeah, it's also, so that's one part of focus. Uber's focus in general, just if you listen to Dara speak, is like, yeah, they're pushing profitability is a huge thing for them right now. They're pushing in a lot of the markets, they're bigger markets around the world. They want to keep their market share or increase it and then go into other verticals. So that seems to be their focus.
Besides focus, do you think there's something that you do that even if tomorrow Dara decided, oh man, there's a billion people, like you said, there's a billion people in these little cities, like let's go after them, that they would, obviously they'd be a big threat, but is there something you're doing that would still be an important differentiator, an important moat, something that might actually make it hard for them to just do what they're doing in Toronto and do it in Thunder Bay and make it work just as well?
I think for us, like drivers, if you look at rideshare companies, not Uber, but like any large rideshare company around the world, a lot of the drivers are like seen as commodities. So just you constantly recruit drivers, get drivers on board, and the more drivers you add, price comes down and so on. With us, like we really focus on making it a great job and great earning opportunity for our drivers. And there's like being obsessed with making it a great experience for our drivers. We have better retention in these places, and drivers tend to stick to our platform. So yeah, that's a couple other things that we do that just like people in small towns care about. We do a bunch of stuff to like support the community. So every month, a portion of all rides get donated to different local causes to help different things that we care about, buying families groceries, supporting shelter houses, and so on. We throw driver parties in these markets. We have group chats with our drivers. So we're really just obsessed with supporting the community and making it a great experience for the drivers. And what we're seeing happening from doing that is like ride sharing isn't the only competitor in these smaller markets. It's also food delivery. So people have choice. They can work for food delivery companies. They can work for Amazon doing deliveries. They could do ride sharing.
So what about like, that's the other one I was going to ask is DoorDash specifically, because my understanding is they started in suburbs. So they have a little bit more, I don't know if those are really small towns, but they didn't start in like the big metros, right?
Yeah. And if you look at DoorDash's model, they succeeded in a lot of these areas. Skip the Dishes for Canadian people listening. Skip dominates in the smaller towns, and we operate similar to them. So, but what we're seeing is by focusing on making it a great experience for the drivers, we're getting people coming from food delivery. We're getting people coming over from that are doing deliveries for Amazon. And then, ride sharing, we'll see what happens in the future if other players come in. I'm sure they will at some point. And we'll just keep obsessing about making it the best experience for our drivers and the best experience for our customers.
Awesome, man. Well, Cody, it's been an amazing episode. Honestly, out of all of, especially because, these marketplaces, like they tend to be, we think of them as like kind of one big winner, right? Like this winner takes all stuff. And we don't necessarily think about the fact that there can be, only one or two winners in one place, but there's a lot of different places and therefore a lot of winners. And even like, I think at the continental level, we know that there's a winner in North America, there's some winners in South and in Asia, they're all different, but we don't really think about zooming in. And the only analogy I can come up with, and it's kind of a shitty one, but I sometimes think of like, sometimes there's big companies that target enterprise, right? And they're selling $100K, $1 million plus contracts. And it's hard for them to go after the long tail SMB, and you often have other players serving the long tail SMB. And even if they're smaller, it's not that easy for the big company to all of a sudden decide, you know what, I don't just care about these $1 million deals. I also care about the $1,000 a year deals. Like they just don't. And so in a sense, like this is a little similar, right? It's like, yeah, if you add them all up, it's, a billion people, but you got to get a GM per place. You got to build a new playbook. And every time you crush one Thunder Bay, it's not going to move the needle for you. So it just doesn't get appreciated as much from them. And so strategically, it's actually kind of hard for them to do it. And I think you're probably right, which is that the playbook, obviously there's a lot of similarities, but it's not the same playbook. And especially on the driver churn side, I totally agree. Like you just have to think about it differently when your population isn't nearly as big. And also in many cases, not even really growing. So you got to like work with kind of what you have. Anyways, it's been a crazy, crazy story. And also just frankly, like, unexpected. I think if I told most people, hey, like, do you think like an unfunded company could ever create like, tens of millions of dollars in revenue, quote unquote, competing with Uber, Lyft, they'd probably say no. So you proved a lot of people wrong, man, I'm sure.
No, I appreciate it, man. We got a long ways to go. And like the scary thing too is like if we actually knew what we were doing and we knew about like the venture world, the startups, we probably would have never started this company.
That's a funny point, man, especially because, dude, if you had started it from the venture mindset, your probably first thing would have been go and like do pitches and like accelerators, and you would have gone crushed, man. Like everybody would have told you what an idiot you are. You know what I mean? Instead, you just went out and did it and it worked. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Long ways to go. We're just getting started. We're in 24 cities. There's thousands of cities around the world. And like, we got to hit the gas, stay focused, launch all these communities. And then over time, we want to power all these communities. So if people want rides, deliveries, or different services, we want to be essentially the super app for all these smaller towns. And so we got to keep executing, keep pushing. And yeah, we've got a lot of incredible people working on this. So I'm super, super grateful.
Well, Cody, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, great chatting with you, man. Have a good day.
If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to a Product Market Fit Show and leave a review. Please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover this show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing like great podcast or I love this podcast, whatever it is, just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.